Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is Burning Questions. The topic that set the internet on fire today is what is going to happen to Ukraine now that Trump is president. We're going to be discussing his peace plan and his nominations and how they are relevant to Ukraine. And today with me, I have Paul Nyland to help us answer these questions.
Hi, it's a pleasure to join you. And I'm sure from our brief initial conversation while we were setting up, this will be an interesting chat.
Awesome. Well, so we were talking, as Paul said, a little bit behind the scenes, and well, a lot has happened yesterday. A lot has happened in the past week. A lot of it is scary. I think no matter what side of the election you're on, to be unbiased here, which is really hard, but we'll try. If Kamala Harris were to win, then we know exactly what was going to happen to Ukraine, right? We knew exactly what her plan was. We knew kind of what the people around her were like and what's going to be the course for the next 4 years. With Trump, we don't know. And we don't know because he himself says things that are contradictory to themselves. His admin comes out and says things that are contradictory. Then his other parts of his admin come out and say that the people who are saying them are not even his admin. So we are in a very, very big hot mess. He's not even president yet, and there are already some very controversial things happening. So what do you think we should start? What do you think we should start from?
I think the first thing is that there are lots of different signs that are coming out of what the Trump administration is going to be. As you say, he's not yet been inaugurated, but what we can see, and it's a continuation of the first Trump presidency, is a continuation of chaos.
Yeah.
Trump is a chaos agent. And, I mean, we can see from the kind of cabinet level picks that he's been making over the last 48 hours that um, there are some very worrying signs coming out of what's going to be the anchor of the democratic world over the next 4 years. And, putting people like Tulsi Gabbard in charge of national intelligence, proposing people like Matt Gaetz as the Attorney General of the United States of America. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard is a dangerous person. She is a Putinist. She is an apologist for Assad and Assad's use of chemical weapons on civilians. But Matt Gaetz, who is another person in the Trump orbit who is facing allegations of sexual misconduct, but then he's completely unqualified to be the Attorney General of the United States of America as well. So, I mean, yeah, there's all kinds of chaos in the last 48 hours, and there will be for the next couple of months until the inauguration, and then we'll see what actually happens. And there's the question. That's actually how I wanted to answer you. We don't know yet. There's lots and lots of different ideas that are being floated as trial balloons to see how one situation might be resolved, another situation might be
Mm-hmm.
approached. We just don't know. We have to wait and see. But the initial signs are worrisome.
Worrisome. I've been looking at his nominations. The National Security Advisor, right? The National Security Advisor, I think is actually something that somewhat made me a little less worried because he has been very pro-Ukrainian from the very beginning. I think that he's gone a little less pro-Ukrainian by the closer it's gotten to the election, the less pro-Ukrainian he's gotten, and I think that that's definitely strategy. And I would rather have someone who in their heart has the right ideas and doesn't says what he thinks Trump wants him to say in order to get into office than someone who absolutely hates Ukraine at its core and might do things the right way just because the job requires it. So that nomination is kind of a balancing act for me. Now the nomination for the for the Secretary of Defense, that is worrying. That is worrying because it's a right wing extremist. It's a guy who absolutely hates Ukraine, who's said multiple very, very terrible things about Ukraine throughout his Fox News career because he's also not qualified to be the defense secretary. He's just, yes, he's served, yes, he's a veteran. Most of his military career was actually writing books about how to snitch on people in the military, not really serving in the military. So it's a little bit, I think that sets the scene here a little.
So if we're talking about Mike Waltz, first of all, I read through a thread yesterday with various quotes from him, things that he said along the line when talking about Ukraine.
Yeah.
And one thing that I noticed is that several of his objections were based on falsehoods. They were based on nonsense and the typical kind of talking points that common on the right. So, for example, one of the things that he said is that there is no accountability. We need more oversight. It's wrong, flatly wrong. There is tons of oversight on all of the aid, whether it's military aid or whether it's economic aid or whatever it is. There's tons of oversight on all of the aid that comes to Ukraine. It doesn't end up in the black market because, quite simply, we need those weapons to kill the Russians who are occupying our land. Full stop. That's why the weapons to the black market. But when we talk about the Pentagon chief, I mean, the Department of Defense being headed by Pete Hegseth, who, as you know, he is a veteran. He has been deployed in active duty, and in the last couple of years, he's made a name for himself as a talking head on Trump's favorite news channel, and this is why obviously Trump has a rapport with him. But he's not qualified to lead an organization that employs 2 million people. That was a quote that I heard. It was unattributed, but it was from one of his former Fox colleagues. Is Pete's going to be in charge of 2 million people? That's insane. But the other very dangerous element of him, and this is a dangerous element of the Trump coalition, is that Pete Hegseth is a part of this very, very dangerous Christian nationalist movement that people like Betsy DeVos, who was the head of the education department in the first Trump administration, she's also a part of that move. This also leads into this Project 2025 that we've heard so much about, and it's very, very scary to see people of such degrees of religious extremism being given senior administration posts in what is coming.
Yeah, well, I don't even know how to, every time I talk about this and every time I talk about Trump's nominations and every time I have a question of like, what do you think is going to happen? I don't know how to like properly put it in words because I personally dislike Trump highly, right? But as someone who works in the media, I have to be unbiased in terms of how I evaluate what sort of his persona and his actions, right? And I feel like there is just not an unbiased way to evaluate this because there's a person who came into power. Okay, sure, Trump himself is a controversial character, but all of the people around him, they're not just controversial characters. The people that he's nominating and the people that he's putting in positions of very high power that do not have oversight are dangerous and they're evil. Tulsi Gabbard doesn't have security clearances. She's not allowed to have security clearances. And she's now, most likely, if they vote for her, going to be the head of intelligence of the United States. That means that not a single country in their right mind of American allies for the next 4 years is going to be sharing any valuable intelligence with the United States. It's as simple as that.
Yep. The Five Eyes, which is, the English-speaking allies around the world, the UK, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, they share to a very, very, very in-depth degree intelligence. And you're exactly right. With Tulsi Gabbard being the director of national intelligence, that is going to stop. But let me go back, Yulia, to what you were saying about bias. I'm also in the media as well. I became a journalist a decade ago. I've lived in Ukraine for 21 years now. But when the annexation of Crimea happened and when the Russian war in the Donbass was in its early days, I started writing because I wanted to be able to explain Ukraine's situation in the English language to a wider audience. And people would say to me, like, so you're based in Ukraine, you're hardly unbiased. And my standard response is our job when we have accepted the responsibility of putting opinions into the public space, our job is to be factually correct, not to be completely he said, she said. Like there's an old journalism 101, right? If one person says it's raining, the other person says it's not. It's not your job to report both sides.
Yeah.
Open the window and stick it out and see which one's telling the
Yeah.
truth, right? So we can be objectively truthful when we are covering Trump and his nominees and his policies, and I'm sure that's something that we'll get onto, his policies and plans for Ukraine. And accusations of bias can be simply set aside by stating that. Okay, what have I said that's factually wrong?
Nothing. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, there is also, that one thing with Trump where I feel like, as Ukraine's sort of strategy in appealing to Trump and hoping that, his ego might be moved by I don't know what, and he would want to help us, because in reality, and I say this all the time, Trump is not going to do anything out of the goodness of his heart, and neither is his administration. They're going to do it based on ego. They're going to do it based on power. They're going to do it based on what lines their pockets and what's profitable to them, right? Profitable and convenient to them. So the issue, I think, with covering Trump as a Ukrainian, or as Ukrainian media, is that where is the line between your being objective and between you're pissing him off because you're telling the truth about him, And it's kind of this thing where we live in this world where America elected this guy who will not take any criticism whatsoever, who is putting these people around him that are Fox News hosts, that are about to run departments with millions and millions of people working for them, that people who don't have national security clearances or any clearances, who are now running national security. And you're just sitting here kind of thinking of The Simpsons and thinking, what unreleased episode am I stuck in that I really want to get out of? Who wrote this?
This is probably a very rare thing to say, but I've never actually watched an episode of The Simpsons in my life.
Oh wow!
Well, so I can't talk on that so much, but I mean, once again, we're talking about all of these unqualified candidates from this chaos agent. Here's another thing from what you've just said, actually, that's quite important, is that all of these people are going to have to be confirmed, through the Senate, and it's probably another element of Trump's loyalty test to what are essentially his underlings. He has the party at heel. They will do what he says, by and large. So now we'll see how things turn out in the confirmation hearings that are to come in and it will be a spectacle. But one other thing that you mentioned that's really, really important is how to appeal to the Trump administration. And one thing is through ego, and the other thing is through material incentives. They're very, very, very good points. And we know who Trump is. We know that Trump is a narcissist, and that's not a biased thing to say. That's an observation. Trump is a narcissist, and so to get him on side, people need to stroke his ego, and everybody is doing it. I think it was the Japanese Prime Minister the day before yesterday announced that after 8 years of not swinging a golf club, he's going to take up, his golf lessons again because that's how he's going to get on side with Trump. Everybody realizes this, but the thing about the material incentives, one of the things that the Zelensky team have done that is very, very skillful over the years of the full-scale invasion, especially, but in particular now is they know how to tailor a message to a particular audience. And in crafting the victory plan, Ukraine's victory plan, it was built in there that there was a distinct possibility that Donald Trump might once again be the president of the United States and the person that we have to deal with. So there's a section of the Zelensky peace plan that refers to Ukraine's national resources. which are vast and abundant, and
Yeah.
some extremely rare metals, rare earth metals exist here in Ukraine. And the pitch is those people who help us to get to victory, they're going to be able to share in this massive wealth. And there was
Yeah.
another point that came up in a conversation that was recorded by a guy called Lev Parnas, who has since turned
Oh yeah.
against Trump. But Lev Parnas recorded this conversation over a dinner with Trump and various other people. And one of the first things that came up is Ukraine is a gas-rich country. And Trump is like, really? Ukraine? It has all that gas? So, planting those seeds in his mind of why it's in his interest to support Ukraine has been a very, very wise foundation to what is coming now.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, also when you mentioned Lev Parnas, I know exactly who it is. Also, if you maybe people don't know, but his kid Aaron Parnas is a lawyer in D.C. and he is incredibly pro-democratic and incredibly well. I know Lev Parnas' scandals and and the fact that he was with Donald Trump and Donald Trump was blackmailing Zelensky over aid to Ukraine, over Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and all of that. But so Aaron actually has been dedicating a lot of his time on social media, writing about him overhearing the conversations, which is quite big because, as a kid, when you overhear these conversations between Trump and your father, you kind of like remember this in your head. And the fact that there was a kid there, well, like 14, 15, and no one, and people were still talking about high security clearance things is crazy. But then in the past, like 2.5 years, he's been talking a lot about Ukraine and America and the United States and Israel. And so he's been doing, I guess, he's been doing the job that his dad couldn't, and balancing the family, sort of the family reputation. He's really great in that. So, yeah, every time I hear about Lev Parnas and then I think about something negative, I have this dissonance in my head because how do you have two people in the same family that are so different? But
So let me just come back on that because again, that's another really important observation as well. These people correcting themselves and rebalancing themselves, having been in the Trump orbit and a part of what he was doing. And so we can see Lev Parnas, Anthony Scaramucci, Michael Cohen, all of these people that have been in the Trump orbit and have now turned themselves into his biggest critics.
yeah.
That's a very, very interesting thing that these people are seeking some kind of balance within themselves, having served evil. Now they're trying to kind of get the redress. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Well, I think that in my personal evaluation of this, right, is these guys wanted to kind of be in on a bit more of a corrupt America where corruption is easier when you're rich and like making money is easier. And when you're buddy with the president, certain things fly that they normally wouldn't fly. And I think what they saw inside is that he's not interested in just that. He's interested in absolute power, and he's interested in completely changing the dynamic of the United States in order for him and his family to be able to do that forever. And I think that's when all of these guys that were initially on board were like, that's not, wait a second. This is a little too authoritarian for what we've signed up for, right? Because at this point, it does affect them. It's going to affect their kids. It's going to affect their kids' rights. It's going to affect like absolutely everything. It's also going to deflate the country completely. I mean, we're not going to be talking about American politics that doesn't concern Ukraine, right? But all of the policies that Trump and his lackeys want to implement, that would completely destroy the United States economy and its standing in the world, like based on just the amount of stuff that they want to put in, right? Which is also an interesting thing, right? When I think about what's going to happen with the U.S. support to Ukraine, it's not just whether the U.S. is going to support Ukraine, right? But it's also whether the U.S. is going to be able to. Because if we think about Trump's plan to deport 1 million immigrants a year, which costs, $88 billion to do, and the illegal immigrants pay about $92 billion in taxes, that's very costly, and it's also an incredibly traumatic process. And it's going to put the U.S. standing down, and it's gonna it's going to cause a lot of inflation and a lot of workforce issues because those are employees. Whether you want it to be that way or not, those are employees, right? If you're going to start banning books and education and disbanding departments and stuff, I don't know what position the US is going to be in a year from now, right? Because we all sort of talk about what the US is going to do with Ukraine, but what is the US going to be in a year from now?
So there's a few things to unpack in there. Let me go back first of all to something you said about the lackeys trying to enrich themselves. Perfect case in point. Traditionally, the first foreign visit of a US president is to Canada. Trump decided to go to Saudi Arabia. After leaving office, Saudi investors, the Saudi Wealth Fund, gave Jared Kushner, the former president's son-in-law, $2 billion to his investment fund. $2 billion. When we're talking about the effects that Trump's announced policies, domestic policies, are going to have on the US and the US economy, you're right that deporting all of those undocumented workers is going to really have a major effect on the jobs market, on the ability of the United States to be able to simply function at a basic level. We know the kind of jobs that immigrant workers do, and they tend to be the kind of things that the indigenous population don't want to do. They don't want to be the cleaners in hotels or servers in restaurants or whatever it might be. Not to say anything bad about either of those
Of course.
professions, but no, the deportation plan is going to have a huge effect on GDP. It's going to reduce GDP. The pressure on inflation is more going to come from if Trump does go ahead and implement his wide-ranging tariff plans from various different countries or organizations. I mean, like the EU, for example. One of the things that the EU wants to avoid is a trade war with the United States of America. But for the EU, the US is their largest trading partner as well. So if Trump decides that he wants a 30%, 60% tariff on goods that are coming from the EU, or 100% on electric vehicles that are coming from China, or whatever it is, which obviously will do a favor to his buddy Elon, the first buddy Elon Musk, right? Whatever those tariffs are, the cost is going to be met by the American consumer. It's not a genius plan to tax foreign countries. It's going to drive inflation in the United States of America. And people have tried to explain this to Trump, but he just cannot get it into his head. He cannot understand it.
I mean, I honestly don't know what he's driven by in proposing that, because even for him, this seems to be something that you're supposed to. Why? It's not doing anything good to you. It's not doing anything good to anyone. I understand why he would want to tax electric vehicles from China, because again, that helps Elon Musk. Or if you tax like Rivians or whatever it is, Rivian might be made in the United States. I'm not sure, but point is, all of these electric vehicles that are competitors, sure, then Elon Musk is the only car that an American person can afford if they are getting an electric vehicle. That's understandable, but then everything else really doesn't make any sense, because that doesn't help anyone unless he's just literally going to be going billionaire by billionaire and thinking, what is it that you do and make in the United States? We're going to tax that with tariffs. But in that case, it's just, at that point, it's just lunacy. But yeah, I really don't understand what his sort of benefit is in implementing these tariffs. My worry, right, is that if the U.S. enters recession, that's also going to result in a worldwide recession. And the U.S., the U.S. electorate, the people at large, do not understand how much impact they have on the world. Like, the U.S. is engaging in this politics of isolationism right now. And that's all good and jolly. But the U.S. has also positioned itself as a world superpower, which means that when you vote in for a president, you're not only voting for a president for yourself, you're voting in a president for the whole world in a way, because from that person and from their policies and from their administration, a lot of the world it impacts a lot of the world. And so my worry is that, if the US is going completely crashing down, then the rest of us are probably going to follow as well.
Going back to the point about lining up billionaires, there was a story about a month ago where Donald Trump had meetings with a series of executives from the major hydrocarbon companies in the United States of America, and simply said to them in a transactional manner, "You donate $1 billion to my re-election campaign and tell me what regulations you don't like, and we're going to have them gutted." Like, I mean,
Yeah.
that was the conversation that he had. But I mean, in terms of the contagion effect, if the United States does move towards a recession as a result of these policies by Trump, then yes, the United States sneezes, everyone else catches a cold. We all know that. The same thing about us even discussing that possibility, though, is that what the Biden administration have managed to achieve over this 4 years has been termed, as recently as a week ago, a soft landing. They've managed to get inflation under control. They've managed to create record numbers of jobs. The United States economy that is being handed to Trump, that we're discussing him ruining, is actually in peachy condition right now. And we're talking about the possibility of him ruining it and how it affects the rest of the world.
Yeah, well, it's similar to, there was this Obama speech where Obama was talking to the people that voted for Trump because of the economy. And he's like, of course he had a great economy. It was my economy because it was the economy that was handed to Trump. Because normally I think also people don't realize, especially those that are not in America, is that the first 2 years of someone's presidency are a direct result of the previous 4 years. It's really hard to accomplish something in the United States in the 4 year sort of like within your first term, which is why the second terms of presidents are usually more impactful when they're consistent, when they're together. But in this particular case, I'm also worried, that normally people talk about checks and balances. And people say that this is not going to be possible, dropping Ukraine is not going to be possible because checks and balances. What checks and balances? The court is red, the Senate is red, the House is red, the White House is red. The checks and balances are kind of, they fly a little bit out of the window here. Although I will preface this by saying that I don't think it is monetarily convenient for Trump to throw Ukraine out of the window. And we're seeing this as well by him testing the narrative and his advisors and a lot of people saying that, kind of throwing narratives out there that he is going to be sticking with Ukraine, and the people that he chooses that are like slightly or have been vocally pro-Ukrainian. I mean, I'm sure he's currently trying to figure out whether Ukraine is useful for him or not. So I don't necessarily see him. Completely abandoning Ukraine because I don't think it's profitable for him or it's the best choice for him. But but the fact that there is absolutely no one to sort of hold the horses is terrifying.
It is terrifying. I wrote a new article yesterday, in actual fact, and there were a couple of things that I wanted to weave into the article. Mm-hmm. And when I say weave, I'm not talking about what Trump has been pretending he's doing in his campaign rallies when he goes off on a tangent and pretends it was all some, deliberate ploy. But weaving together 1,000 days of war, the incoming Trump administration and what that can mean for Ukraine. I wrote yesterday, let's take stock of where we are, right? The number of times that Ukraine has been close to capitulation is 0. The number of Russian losses is 710,000 personnel.
Yeah.
The number of Russian tanks lost is over 3,000. The IFVs, the infantry fighting vehicles, are being destroyed at a rate faster than they can be replaced, and so on and so on and so on. So the reason why I mention this is because Trump needs to understand, and the people around Trump need to understand very, very quickly that there's one side that's going to win and there's one side that's going to lose. And the side that's going to lose is the one that has already suffered 710,000 manpower casualties. And so we there's a lot of you said pissed off earlier on. I'm going to say bullshit. There's a lot of bullshit that we need to get over, right? One of the bullshit ideas is that Russia is such a massive country with so many people, 143 million population, that will never run out of manpower. This is not true. This is a myth, and it needs to be debunked. Russia has already lost. I mean, the USSR only lost 10 to 15,000 in Afghanistan in 10 years.
Yeah.
Russia has lost 710,000 in less than 3 years.
Yeah.
In Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
So what Trump and his people need to get is that they need to be on the winning side. And there's no way that Vladimir Putin has a winning hand here in Ukraine.
Yeah.
We've seen them increase the rate of their attacks across the front line in recent weeks. They're trying to grab as much as they can, and they don't care what the death toll is. That's why it was 1,950 the day before yesterday. 2,000 dead in a single day.
Yeah.
20% of all of the Afghan casualties from a decade in a day.
Yeah.
That's what the Ukrainian armed forces achieved the day before yesterday. And that's what Trump needs to understand. Ukraine is the winning side, and he needs to back the winning side. Vladimir Putin is going to lose this war. The last almost 1,000 days have laid the groundwork for the defeat of the Russian military capability to continue any kind of warring. That's what has been happening for 1,000 days, and that's what Trump needs to get on board with and to back. And backing that doesn't just mean, yes, we will continue to support Ukraine. Yes, Russia is completely wrong and has committed tens of thousands of war crimes and all the rest of it. But backing Ukraine means, and here is the increase in volume of ammunition that we are sending, and here is our formal permission for Ukraine to use long-range strikes on Russian military airfields inside of Russia and ammunition dumps inside of Russia and so on and so on. That's what needs to happen. That's how we have to get out of it. But the flip side, and this is a very important point as well, and I know we're kind of coming towards the end. Shame that we've saved this for the last, but for anybody still watching, the flip side is if the US turns off the tap, Ukraine is not going to capitulate. Even so, Ukraine is not just going to roll over. Donald Trump could attempt to enforce whatever kind of solution he and his people might come up with, but Ukraine has agency. Ukraine can say no, and Ukraine has fought through hundreds of thousands of instances of individual bravery, millions of them, in fact, for 1,000 days, and Ukraine just isn't giving up. And that is the key factor that needs to be considered into any thinking that's coming from the White House. Ukraine isn't giving up, and we have other partners as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's like I think that people think that Trump is the people that want Ukraine to surrender, right? Like the Russian sympathizers and whatever. I think their idea is that Trump comes to office and he signs the capitulation. I've literally heard this being said. Trump is going to sign the capitulation forms. Trump is not the president of Ukraine. Trump can't sign any capitulation forms. He can turn off the tap. He can stop giving us aid, which in which case I hope that Europe is going to step up, and we also should be okay for a while as well with the resources that we've managed to have, but Trump can't sign anything to force Ukraine into anything. Zelensky might. Zelensky can sign a capitulation agreement. He's not going to do that, but he can because he's the president of this country. However, Trump, he has nothing to do with that.
And you and I both know that, I mean, it's not just Zelensky's decision. It is the decision of the people of this country, right? And I mean, whether we are in the armed forces or whether we are in civilian life, continuing to ensure that the country functions as it must do. Whatever the challenges are, whether it's yesterday's missiles fired at Kiev, which is where I'm sitting now, or whether it's the push on the front lines and the the need of our armed forces to simply continue to wipe them out in large numbers whenever they move. These are choices that individual Ukrainians have made and will continue to make. And the vast majority of Ukrainians want the end of this war to be the return of our borders as they were when we again became an independent nation in 1991. And that's not too much to ask, right? Where this started a decade ago with the theft of Crimea and then the hot war in Donbass, all of that must be reversed to move towards a just peace. And a just peace has been the language that has been coming out of Ukraine's diplomatic corps for the last few months already. And I see it more and more now being brought into the kind of writing and coverage on Ukraine. That what Ukraine's asking for is not just peace. We all want peace, and nobody wants peace more than the Ukraine. But we need a just peace. And a just peace means no Russian fascist occupation of any part of Ukrainian territory affecting any Ukrainian citizen. That's it. That's how it ends.
Yeah, I also think that it's worth pointing out that just peace, what people consider to be peace, which is like, demilitarized zones and Russia taking what it already took, is not peace, because it's just lack of military action, because people in those territories are tortured.
Let me just thank you very much for bringing that one up as well, because I looked at this for the article I wrote yesterday. You talk about a demilitarized zone. So this is, let's see if we can apply like a Korean peninsula solution to Ukraine, right? So the DMZ in Korea is 160 miles long. And the South Korean side is policed by 25,000 United States boots on the ground, or 50,000, 25,000 personnel, 2 boots per person, right? The front line in Ukraine, or the contact line in Ukraine, is 5 times that size. So if the US has got 25,000 personnel stationed permanently in South Korea, then where are we going to get 125,000 troops from to police this demarcation line or whatever it might be in Ukraine? I mean, it hasn't been thought through.
Well, according to Trump, it's going to be Germany and France enforcing it and paying for it. And I literally say this every single time, as this gives me such Mexico is going to pay for the wall vibes. I can't this is so it's just, it's just so eerily reminiscent of that. But yeah, I agree with all of your points. I think that the only way to end this war is really a just peace for Ukraine, where politicians that don't understand what they're doing shouldn't be writing peace plans, and that the only peace plan that should be implemented is the peace plan that Ukraine is writing, because we are the only people that are actually suffering the physical consequences of this, right? And I do agree that we can talk about what's going to happen when Trump takes office in terms of Ukraine as much as we want, but all of this is going to be speculation based on absolutely no rhyme or reason, because we don't know. He's the type of person where we genuinely don't know. We don't even know what's true and what's not true anymore, because, there was information that he was talking to Putin. Now there is no such information, because there was a different information released. And all of these things are just speculations, because they have absolutely no way of proving or disproving them. So I guess the best thing to say is, whatever Trump does about Ukraine, we don't know. What's going to happen to Ukraine when Trump is going to come to office? Ukraine's going to keep fighting. That's pretty much the summary.
That is the summary. And the former foreign minister, Dmytro Kuleba, said if we have to, during the period when the supplemental bill to provide more funding for Ukraine was being held up, and Kuleba said at the time, we will fight them with shovels if we have to.
Exactly.
Ukraine will keep on fighting. And as a person who has lived in this country for a very, very long time, I'm absolutely not surprised. I know the nature of the people here. I think I have a decent understanding of how this country ticks. And the simple fact of the matter is that we have been invaded a decade ago by a country that has sought to subjugate Ukraine for centuries.
Yeah.
This is not a recent reaction to NATO that's only existed for 75 years, right? I mean, for hundreds of years, the Russian Empire, the USSR, whatever it was, have been trying to eliminate Ukrainians and Ukrainian statehood and Ukrainian identity.
Mm-hmm.
This is the time now to put an end to it and to show them once and for all, get out.
Yeah.
Get out. These are our borders. This is our country. We don't want you. We don't want your influence. We certainly reject your rule.
Yeah.
And we will go our own way. And you know, we've had to fight through huge losses and enormous sorrow. We've had to fight a brutal, bloody war to earn those freedoms.
Yeah.
But by God, earning them is exactly what we're doing right now, and it will continue regardless of what Trump does.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the question that people are posing is just wrong, and the best note to end this on is, it's not about what's going to happen to Ukraine when Trump takes office. It's what's Trump's policy going to be about Ukraine. That's one thing, but what's going to happen to Ukraine is still going to be Ukraine, and Ukraine is still going to be doing everything that we possibly can to shut Russia down. And that's regardless of Trump or Harris or whoever, or alien invasion. It's still going to be the same thing. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today. It was a very, very interesting conversation, and I sure do hope to see you here again next time.
It will be a pleasure to come back and chat to you again. But you know, I just get this picture when you talk about an alien invasion of if that happens after the 20th of February and they come down and they say, "Take me to your leader," right? And then you do that, and they go, seriously, him?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the guy you put in charge. The aliens would leave immediately. This planet is beyond repair. They're just committed self-harm.
Yeah, especially if you give them like dossiers on all of his, on everyone around him too, and they're just like, okay, well, you know what? You deal with it.
Lovely talking to you. Let's do it again sometime.
Awesome. Thank you so much. See you soon. Well, I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and as per usual, we always aim to put out fires, but we end up setting things on fire. And I really hope that this conversation got your gears turning in maybe a direction you didn't think you would be turning them, in terms of politics, in terms of Trump admin and what they're going to be doing, in terms of Ukraine and what Ukraine is going to be doing in terms of all of this. If you enjoyed this conversation, please don't forget to follow this channel, and also don't forget to give this video a like and share it with a friend, because you never know who else might enjoy it. And also, as per usual, please leave your comments, questions, and suggestions under the video below, because I read all of them and they help me tailor next segments to you. See ya!